Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 304, and I had a conversation with Mike Errico. He's a recording artist, educator, and author. His book, Music, Lyrics, and Life, a field guide for the advancing songwriter, is in its second printing. His book is really interesting. He interviewed a ton of heavyweights like Shane McAnally, Paul Stanley, Madison Love, but also reached out to other types of folks to write the book, including astrophysicist Jana Levin, renowned painter John Curran, best-selling author George Saunders, and a fly fisherman, of all things, as well. So, he talked to all sorts of people about what makes the art of songwriting, who it says about who we are, where we're going, really fascinating outlook and conversations with people from all over the place. I think it's a book that could be read by anybody who isn't necessarily a songwriter, because it talks about patterns in the universe and better living through creativity, how to be playful and challenged, how to expand your mind and your way of thinking, and magical thinking. I really dug it. I dug him too. He's friends with my second cousin, Ed. Shout out to Ed for the introduction. And yeah, I'm looking forward to you hearing this. Okay, usual stuff. Hey Human Podcast can be found on Instagram and Facebook under Hey Human Podcast. To find my personal Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, it's under Susan Ruthism. You can email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. If you want to check out my music and my art or interviews that have been done with me instead of by me, you can go to susanruth.com, and they're all there. You can also sign up there on the mailing list. If you're into music, like I mentioned before, yes, you can check out susanruth.com, but if you just find Susan Ruth out there in all the musical places, you will find me. I'm on Spotify and Amazon and iTunes and everything. My more recent album, All I Ever Wanted Was Everything, is out there for you to check out. Check out my YouTube channel, Official Susan Ruth. They're on YouTube. Subscribe to that. It definitely helps, and I appreciate it. Heading back to heyhumanpodcast.com website, there you will find the links page. Every episode has its own pile of links that I curate for you, so you just have to go to one-stop shopping. You can find out a bunch of information about my guests and what we've talked about on the show. While you're on heyhumanpodcast.com, check out the store. You can get merch there, really high-quality stuff, good stuff, pencil cases, book bags, t-shirts, hats, all that kind of stuff. And you can also contribute. Hey Human is an ad-free podcast, and every bit helps. And you can show your support that way if you are so inclined. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. That's another great way to help the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for getting the word out and spreading the love. Stay safe out there, be kind, practice self-care, and know that I'm out here thinking of you. Yeah? All right, let's get into this. Here we go. Hi.
I'm just cranking some Susan Ruth. Cranking some Promise Me Something.
There you go. Reba ended up cutting that song.
Reba McEntire?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
It's pretty freaking cool. I cried, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. When was that?
2015. Her Love Somebody album. She changed the title from Promise Me Something to Promise Me Love, but it's Reba, so I didn't care. And then she did add one word. She added the word romance. So she says romance and love, and that word just makes me willy. And that was a real bummer. But, it's Reba. Apparently she goes in with a basic understanding of the lyric, and then she just kind of wings it.
You don't have to answer this, but what does that do for the co-writing?
Nothing. She doesn't do anything.
She didn't take any.
No.
That's nice.
She's not she's one of the sweetest people in the world. When everybody that was on that record got a hand-signed thank you note from her, handwritten, And then she threw us a big, because I think she knows the music industry isn't what it was. And so getting on the record is one thing, but it's not really going to amount to much. And even if it's a decent record, especially for an icon, old school artist. And so she threw us a big party and she performed and she played the whole record and gave us foods. And it was really great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. She's a class act. Was
this in LA or was
Nashville? Nashville.
So are you working with a publisher and all? Are you doing all?
I do everything. I do everything on my own. I'm a songwriter. I'm a performer. I'm a podcaster. I'm an abstract painter. And I just sold in the beginning of last year 2 short films.
Cool.
So all the storytelling things is what I do.
Short film as in like you did
10 minutes.
The screenplay or the...
Yeah, screenplay. Yeah, 2 short film screenplays. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I had never done those before, but I figured if you can write a 3.5 minute movie, i.e. a song, then you can write a screenplay.
Absolutely. That's so cool. So is it getting filmed or is it...
Well, we'll see. All that stuff takes time. The last I heard, they're working on the money part. So...
Right.
Yeah. God knows how long that takes.
That's very cool. What other cuts have you been getting or have you gotten?
I had a couple cuts on Lone Star. These are sort of iconic old school artists, but in Americana, Don Pedigo, in Sweden, The United in pop. I had a top 10 in Turkey on an artist named Erdem Kine. He's like the Timbaland of Turkey. It's just sort of all over the place, And
you're like, you're pitching on your own, like you're not on.
Yeah. I mean, so every cut I've ever gotten, I got on my own. I think nobody takes care of your business like you do. And I grew up in a generation where it's like, if you want to play, if you want to do anything, you do it yourself. I used to, when my album, How to Say Goodbye came out, I made a cast of characters that were worked for me, quote unquote. So I had a manager and a booking agent, and she was English, and I pretended to be all these people, and I just make phone calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Separate phone numbers or no? Same.
No, same, like the business line or whatever. I was scrappy. Kids these days don't understand how scrappy you had to be back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I had Benny Blanco come in once, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
He was like, I gotta talk to the CEO. I got a kid. You gotta know him. Like whatever. Like it did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, hi. Nice to see you.
You too.
So you're friends with my cousin, my second cousin.
I went to high school with him.
Oh.
He is my attorney.
Okay.
He's been in my class.
He's a sweetheart.
He's a sweetheart. We were on Billions together.
Yeah.
And what else?
His wife sings quite beautifully.
Amazing. I've seen her, Kareen.
Yeah.
And we've just been out and doing, we've been friends for years. I mean, for decades.
Along with
Brian and also Pete, the Peter Zizzo.
Yeah.
The guy who was in the middle of the of the Billions scene.
Yeah, Brian, he won't never remember this. And I haven't obviously talked to him since, but in 2011, he came to Nashville with the Nashville Film Festival or Screen Festival, whatever, the thing where the screenwriters come and talk to aspiring writers. And I met him then, unbeknownst to me that Ed and I hadn't even officially met Edward yet. I met Edward because I was talking to my dad about my grandmother, and I just did a Facebook search of people with her last name, her maiden name. And I came upon him and I reached out to him. I was like, hey, I think we're cousins.
Oh, that's so amazing. Yeah. He's a really sweet guy.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to have an attorney that you believe.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I certainly had the opposite.
Yeah.
So he's
anyway,
been great for
him. Yeah. So it's a small world after all. I hope to meet him in real life because I've never met him. Yeah. I'm going to come to New York in the spring, I hope, and get to meet him.
I'm sure you've heard his clients and all.
I mean, vaguely. I know he represents some famous people, but in I don't know if you feel this way, but in my experience, it's best not to worry about who people are surrounded by and just concentrate really on the person themselves.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, he is, he's great on his own, but I mean, like he also has like this other business, this whole other side to him.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hi, Mike Errico. Welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to see you.
You. And
you're in New York?
I am in Brooklyn, New York. We were second generation, to Brooklyn.
Yeah. I mean, it's great.
We're all immigrants.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
I wish more people felt that way. Tell me about you. So you grew up there. Tell me about growing up in the family. Was it a music oriented family? Were you a creative kid? How did you, that was something like, oh, I'm bored, I'm going to pick up an instrument?
Well, it's a creative house. My dad is a doctor, but was also a classical pianist and a music major back in the day. My mom is a painter and sculptor, artist, but a visual person. So put those two together. I have two sisters. One is a Broadway, I don't know, chanteuse. I mean, I'm not really sure. She's like I don't know what number threat she is. She's like about a 7 threat or something of the different, different skills of acting and such. And my younger sister, Melanie, is a designer of jewelry and fashion and all of that. So
incredibly creative family. Yeah.
That's kind of just it was there. Like that's just sort of like what was going on in the house. So
close family, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, we're all literally and figuratively, I think we're all within like 10 miles of each other as we speak.
Wow.
Except for my sister Melanie, who is in Philly.
Okay. Shout
out.
That's
a 2-hour drive.
Yeah.
So we're not very nomadic. That's one thing for sure.
Well, she flew the coop a little.
A little. Yeah.
What was your first instrument of choice?
The first, that's funny you should put it that way. The first of choice, oddly, was the trumpet. I don't know why, but I just picked the trumpet. I tried the piano, and then I tried the trumpet. And the trumpet was rough also. It's very loud and very sharp sounding. So, and also your mouth is occupied and you can't make chords. So there were several limitations to that instrument as far as I was concerned. So then I switched to guitar, and I went. It started classical, classical guitar, because I think mom didn't. The electric guitar is the elevator to the devil. You know that. I don't know. It was a harbinger of something not great, I think.
She felt that way. Religious.
She did.
Well, so religious woman then, or just in theory, electric guitar is
theoretically, it's more culturally. It had more cultural sort of significance, I think, as a dangerous harbinger of delinquency, truancy, possible alcohol. I don't know. I'm not really sure, but that was not. It was not an exciting turn of events for her. So we compromised somehow.
You kids and your rock music.
So I got into classical, which is actually really beautiful. It's a very different way of playing, but I still kind of use some of it. Some of that. Embouchure is not the word, but like those techniques, those sort of finger techniques. And eventually, of course, I got into electric and did all that for a while. When I got out of college, I was getting a lot of work being a sideman or backing female singer-songwriters. So then I switched back to acoustic, to steel string acoustic, and that's sort of where I've sat, for a while.
Not knowing how old you are, the music, just knowing the music that came from New York, Brooklyn, the Bronx, all those places back in the day, just incredible. Especially in a female genre, the incredible Carole King era.
Oh yeah. Well, New York goes through waves, yes, there's the Brill Building and all of that, historically amazing stuff. I don't know if they're all New York people or they would call themselves New York people, but I used to play with people like Lisa Loeb and Paula Cole and I don't know, Jonas Policewoman, and I don't know, people like that. And then there's this other wave, the Strokes and all of that kind of thing, and it runs in cycles like that. But yeah, New York has always been a thing. It's nice to be a teacher here in New York because I'm seeing the next sort of thing happening, so all the places that I've played around the country, now my students are playing, and it's just hilarious. It's hilarious to watch, and to see them doing really well. It's really gratifying to watch that.
When you were coming up, did you have a plan? I'm going to be a musician as a living, or did you think, okay, I'm going to kind of do this side thing. I support other people and I'm going to do something more stable?
Yeah. No, I had no plan. And when I say I had no plan, like some people are like, oh, come on. So you had a plan. I had no plan. I had no idea how I would live past 25 for lots of reasons, but literally in lots of ways as well. I was like, I had no idea what was going on. And then I had my dad took a class, a pop songwriting class. He's a classical player. He took this pop class and hated it. And we have the same name and he didn't want to get his money back. So we just switched. And so I showed up the next day and then I just took the class. So then that became sort of the thing to do. It was the thing to do in the absence of anything to do,
Yeah.
I was a sideman for a while, but I never felt like I had any, no one would listen, right? I just had I was sure that no one was ever going to pay attention. But then I got into all these bands and they were terrible. They're just so bad. And I was like, well, wait a minute. They have such hubris to be doing this. They have such confidence. I don't mean to say hubris, but confidence. Maybe I can pick some of that up. And that, they were sort of like mentors to me as far as in the confidence game.
I mean, I think we know that to be a success, one doesn't necessarily need talent. It's certainly helpful.
No, you need the ability to hear the word no a million times.
Oh, that's for sure.
And I remember I was working, I ran the website for Blender magazine for a while. And we did an article that really impressed me on people, rock stars with Asperger's is basically what it was. And they're just, because you hear no so many times, but someone like Tom York from Radiohead, just didn't, no doesn't penetrate, because he just had the ability, the focus, that he seems to have. And so he was able to withstand, I think, no with more resilience, I think, than someone who's going to be like, oh, you think I suck? You're probably right.
Sure.
It's like the ability to say, to hear no, even on doing this book, promoting this book. I mean, I hear no. Oh my God, how many times?
Well, I mean, I think the musical history books it's filled up with, they're filled up with all the different artists and writers and musicians and things that say, oh my gosh, so-and-so turned me down, such and so. I mean, they all have countless stories, from Elton John to the Beatles to the Stones. I remember I was working on a record in New York, and we were in the last phase of it. So there was some downtime while the engineers futzed around, and it was Godfrey Diamond's room, and he had all these great music books about various acts. And I picked up a YouTube book that was it was just so thick. And I started leafing through it, and it was every song U2 had ever written to that point. And as I thumbed through it, of course, the hit songs were in there, but there were far more, I mean, dare I say, mediocre to crap songs. And I thought, and it was such an inspirational moment for me, because I thought, oh, this is one of the biggest bands in the world, especially at the time, that they can also write terrible stuff, and they just keep going until they get to the good stuff, you know?
Yeah. So many clunkers. Yeah. Yeah. I had a rising singer-songwriter in as a guest, this woman, Jensen McCrae, and she told my class, you know, I have an album coming out. There's 12 songs on it, and I'll write probably, you know, 120 songs a year, and, you know, for the 12, you know, and she's like, you know what? That's not a bad batting average. And so my students just wither when they hear stuff like that. But like, and well, they should, because like, you know, every time I've had people of any level of stardom, like Rob Thomas I had, or like Benny Blanco or whatever, these people, I'm like, how do you approach, like Jack Antonoff, how do you approach the blank page? And they're just like, I don't have the time. Like, I basically pick up where I left off, wherever that was. Once upon a time, there may have been a blank page, but that was the first day I started, and it hasn't been blank since.
Yeah. And I would argue that you're never really done writing a song as much as you want to be, because I go back and listen to records that I've made, and I think, oh, fuck, like, why did I say that? Like, why didn't I write that? But you have to just keep pushing forward. You had to have those in order to get to the ones over there.
It's funny you should say that, because I teach at the New School and at NYU's Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music this semester. And I have a student at the New School, and he was talking about a song that he was finishing. And I was like, you know what? But he couldn't like put the period on the sentence. You know what I mean? He couldn't finish because he had all these other ideas. And I was like, why don't you make several versions of this song? And I was like, what is the definitive version of a song? And why did someone come up with that concept? I feel like that's like a record label concept. Like, they want to own the original version, so they have to say all the other versions are inferior in some way, when they're actually not. And in fact, a lot of times, like the live version or the remix or even the cover from somebody else is the better version of the song. So I was telling him, like, just make 5 versions and let the people figure it out, you know, let them do what they're going to do with it. I don't know if that helps or hurts the idea of finishing a song, but you're right that a song is never finished. So respecting that via different versions could be very helpful.
That's why I find John Mayer so intriguing, because not only is he not afraid to grow in different directions, I think he loves playing with different genres and different ideas, but he also, it seems, never really plays a song the same way twice.
Right. And he's in the dead now. Right.
Right. Which is great.
So like they never, I feel like they invented that, you know?
Yeah.
I guess jazz had something to do with it.
Right. For sure.
Or improv.
Yeah.
But the idea of this being like a rolling concept, you know?
Right. Because music's organic. It's there. It has rules, of course. It's mathematics and it's language, but it also is quite fluid and organic.
Yeah. It's time, basically. I'm trying not to say it's time in a bottle, but it kind of is, right? I mean, it wasn't created to be recorded. It far predates recording. It was the past story. That was its purpose.
Right.
Yeah. So once we got into recording, we got into a different definition of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a weird way to approach it now, because at the end of the day, I mean, you have people like Dave Grohl or someone like that, these advocates for live music, right? And they're just like, if that's it, that's where the rubber really meets the road. And I watch TikTok a lot, and there are like TikTok stitches that are coming in, and they're just like, these old people talking about their live music, when a viral TikTok will do so much more for you and all of this kind of thing. So, I don't know. I mean, that definition is it's nice that it's fluid, I guess.
Yeah.
Or you do both, or you do not, neither. I don't know.
Well, there's a fanaticism. The people are quite fanatical about finality. Also, they think I have to get to the end of this thing, and then when I'm at the end of this thing, that's it, and then I can move on to the next thing. And I would again argue that you've never put anything away. You've never ended anything, because if you hadn't done that thing, you wouldn't be able to do this thing. And technically, they're connected.
I think artists are also sort of bemoaning the death of the album, or which isn't really the death of the album, but the death of people listening to an album straight from start to finish.
Those were the days.
Those were days. But you know what? At the same time, those were also days where like you'd get a couple of good songs and the rest were not so great, but they had to put them out.
I think there was a transition. I was just having this conversation the other day. It used to be that purchasing an album, you go to a vinyl store, you'd get your album. The artwork was incredible. The liner notes were incredible. You would have an experience with this thing. It was a start to finish story that all the songs fed into each other. There was a circular happening there. And then slowly albums were, like you said, a handful of songs good, a couple dogs, and then it became a couple good, mostly dogs. And then it was the record label saying, screw this, we're doing singles.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Another thing, I was talking to someone about this. Another thing is like the album was the thing, right? The album was the vehicle for sales, right? Not everyone who got signed had an album's worth of something to say. Right. But they still had to fill it in some way. So they would fill it with filler, with not great stuff in order to get the single out. You don't have to do that now, but I feel like the album and the concept of the album was really damaged by bad quality control, basically.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. And what was your first album that you bought? Do you remember?
First album I bought, well, I don't remember buying it, but we had a deal in the house that I if I was brave at the dentist, I would get an album, right? And we'd go to the store and get an album. So I have some really great vinyl and teeth also I have still, but I got some great ones, and I was just talking about it. Songs in the Key of Life, I think, might have been one of the very first. I don't know how I was that prescient, but like,
yeah, you were on it.
It's holding up well.
Oh yeah. Again,
have you seen Summer of Soul?
I haven't.
Oh, it's really worth it. Absolutely. Okay. Very young Stevie.
Yeah.
Pre Songs in the Key of Life.
Can you imagine being the whomever it was? And I don't know enough I know his music, obviously, because I shouldn't say who doesn't. Everyone should. That's my shout out. But can you imagine like the first people discovering him as a world sensation? Just imagine that room. I think about that a lot. I think about these rooms where, Stevie Wonder first sang, or I don't know, Nirvana, or Carole King, or Joni Mitchell, for God's sakes, And I think, what did that room do? How did they look at each other? Or did they try and act normal?
I mean, the room changes for sure. I've seen some of them. The one who has eluded me so far is Dolly Parton. Like, I have to see. Like, there's something about going to see people whose names are fixtures in culture.
But you've never seen Dolly play?
I've never seen Dolly play.
Oh, you must.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I'm never disappointed. Even if I don't like the music. Like, I saw Barry Manilow. I just watched the film Listening to Kenny G. Mind-bending, amazing thing. Difficult to listen. I mean, I'm not a fan. It doesn't matter. There's you can feel why, this person is.
It's that X factor that nobody can define.
X factor is exactly a great way to put it. And like, I feel like I've seen some students like that, and people just look around and they're just like, oh my God, are we watching like
the beginning
a thing? Yeah. Like a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
What led you into the path? How did you get into the path of teaching? Where was that along the way?
Totally backwards. Right. So I went, I was touring and record deals and putting stuff out and whatever. And while I was on the road, I got a call from a friend who was like, he worked at a university, and he was like, I'd like you to come in and talk to my students. This is a liberal arts college. We don't have anything. No one really talks about popular music at the faculty level. So why don't you come over and talk to them? And again, the confidence for me comes up. Like, I don't have anything to tell them. Who am I? Like, I don't know. And he's like, you know what? Shut up. And he booked me, and I talked to these students, and I was like, oh my God. And I just had like one of those moments, like the aha kind of lightning bolt moments. I have been teaching, and I have not stopped since then. So it's just sort of been, it's just been, not a calling, but it's a passion. It's really fun. Sure. A calling, whatever. But that was what really got me going, was a friend and a phone call.
Wow.
A friend and a phone call. That's pretty much where most things show up, Isn't
it cool to think that just one moment, one conversation, and the trajectory of all your life gets into a whole new flow?
Completely. It's very weird, and I thank him for it. And he's weirded out by me thanking him, because he's just like, dude, all I did was call you. Stop. You don't have to thank me in the book. I was like, I thanked you in the book. He's like, I just called. It wasn't like I had this grand plan. And of course, I'm thinking, you knew all along to make that phone call. And he's like, sorry, guy. I
had the ruby slippers all along.
I love that movie.
I do,
and
too.
For that reason, is that like, there's no wizard, like,
no.
And it's just
the wizard
the weirdest.
Is within.
Right. I mean, it's kind of the whole, the thing about it. So then from the teaching, I turned and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to teach them? I have to write a book. I need a book. You know what I mean? So then that's how the book came about, was because the teaching came about, because the songwriting came about. And it's all sort of been very backward, but also like almost looks planned.
Yeah, let's talk about the book, Music, Lyrics, and Life. It's a field study. Now, I think that's really interesting to call it a field study for songwriters, right? Because it's not just that. There's all sorts of things going on in there. Yeah. Which, by the way, I finally got the book.
I'm so glad.
I still haven't seen the one that you sent to the house, but
yeah, I mean, I've been sending stuff out, and I've had a few people just like, what is going on with the US mail?
Oh, it's crazy.
What is happening? Like, so I'm getting get tracking numbers. If anyone's thinking about sending a package, get a tracking number.
I'd like to think that somewhere the postman is just sitting and reading the book, and when he's done, he'll put it in my mailbox.
That might be the thing. Yeah. If I gave you a bottle of wine and then it came to you empty, but yeah, it's a field guide, because I know what's already available, and there's so much available on YouTube or whatever. Just like, what are the mechanics of this? And what are the mechanics of that? And like, what, how do you make a chorus? How do you do this? How do you do that? And I didn't want it to be redundant. So, but I did want it to be a new window into the kinds of things that we do. Plus, they're almost like defensive measures for living in a weird way, because, I just think about how definitions of success, when they are external, can lead to tremendous problems for someone in the arts, or it's someone anywhere, someone in the restaurant business. It's what is success, and so putting things like that into perspective means seeing things like the external reward shows of things like American Idol and all of that nonsense, and puts them very much in the enemy category, that has nothing to do with life, with your own definitions of success, and then into your own definitions of like, what do you really want to be writing? Like, there are a lot of people out there who don't want to be Dua Lipa, so don't be. It's a big world. And so getting people to get into their own voice, and into their own definitions of what's good, what's quality, what's success, what makes for a good day. I could have the worst day ever and get a million no's and crappy song done and all this kind of thing. But like, the energy I put towards those things today, that was positive, because it was looking to the core of what I think is important about this discipline, So getting people to talk about that, I think, in my class has been more productive for them than like, oh, check out who's top 5 on Billboard today, which we do. I mean, we do some of that, and it's, Justin Bieber or whoever, fine. But the process of getting things done, I think, becomes much more what I can offer that's unique.
What made you have the decision to talk to so many different kinds of people in different disciplines? Right. Because mostly you read these books, and like Songwriters on Songwriting, for example, you go to the people that are doing the thing, but you decided to go beyond that.
Right. I mean, I did do some of that. I mean, I spoke to Shane McAnally, and I spoke to Paul Stanley, who's the lead singer of Kiss, and to some former students like Madison Love, who writes with Lady Gaga and Katy Perry and all that. But I also wanted to find a new way in that used the same sort of ideas. I think there's like almost a unified theory in lots of different disciplines. When they say don't cook angry, right? Like they say that, well, don't write angry. Like it comes out different if you do write angry, put it that way.
Don't tell that to Charles Bukowski.
Well, sure. But like all these different disciplines have a different facet of what we do, So for instance, I wanted to talk about patience while you're making songs. So instead of talking to someone who's patient about making songs, I spoke to a guy named Greg Felt, who's a fly fisherman on the Arkansas River. And he takes people out fishing, and he has to teach them about patience every day, but he does it with different language. But it's the same concepts, but it's different language. So it's a different way that we see it, because everyone who goes out fly fishing wants that shot they're on the canoe and they got the fish and it goes up on Facebook or wherever, they all want that, but they can't all have it. So he has to temper expectation and get them to be patient. I talked to an astrophysicist about repetition, because choruses repeat. And a student once asked me, like, why do we do this? This is so stupid. Like, you've already heard it. Why do you need to hear it again? And I was like, it's a great question.
Because the brain loves it.
Right. The brain loves it, but B, it's part of our concept of what reality is. And the astronomers, that's what they look for. They look for repeating patterns in the sky if they're going to find someone who they think can control their environment, right? That would be an extraterrestrial or something like that. They're looking for repeated patterns.
Right, like in Contact. That's why we send out the pattern over and over and over again into the universe, because we're hoping that somebody hears that and says, oh, "Wait, that's a pattern. We do patterns. That must be somebody who's sentient." Yes.
Have we talked about Contact ever?
No, we didn't. No.
Do you know that movie?
I love that movie. Yeah,
that's my favorite movie in the world.
Well, and I also love Carl Sagan. So
one of my favorite writers. That is so odd that you said that, because I have been laughed at for my love of Contact. I have Contact songs, songs that are based off of it. I have a song called "Okay to Go," which is from the movie.
Yeah.
I have one called Arecibo, which is the name of the radio observatory in Contact.
That's great.
There are like there's like a half a dozen or so songs that come off of that movie. Yeah. But
it's a great movie.
Yeah.
And it holds up.
It kind of does, right? I mean, the ideas hold up. So, which I love so much. But yeah, repetition of, is something that our brain loves. It calms us. It satisfies us. It makes us almost feel as though we can predict the future because we're predicting a pattern. So once we notice the pattern, we're so much more calm and settled. And that's really why I tell the students, like, can we get a third chorus in here? How can we do that? Can we pull a bridge and add a chorus?
Look at any song coming out of Nashville and you will see how many times the number 3 happens. It is without fail. It's going to be in every hit song you hear. There's going to be a pattern of 3. And mostly in 4/4 time also.
And lots of 4 and lots of 3. Beatles songs, the ones that end, my love from me to you, my love from me to you. There's so many of them that end with 3 repetitions of the title. It's very funny to watch. One of the songs that I use a lot is "Since You've Been Gone" by Kelly Clarkson, which was written by Max Martin and Dr. Luke, and that ends three times. It hits the title setting at the end of the song, like just to drive it home. But we love that.
Yeah.
Right? So that would be why
you said it, and then you remind them you said it.
Right. But that's why I went, I could have just gone to a songwriter, but I thought it would be more interesting to go to an astronomer who's dealing with the same kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about song form. So instead of like talking to somebody who's like really into song form, I spoke to a woman who makes tires for Goodyear, because I was like, you are working in the most perfect form, the circle, right? You can't exit the circle, right? So my students always want to like break the song form because they're like, I'm going to be innovative. And that's admirable, to say that. But the innovation does not come from the form, right? So that was the idea I wanted to give, but I didn't want to just like say it. So I was like, how do we say it and be a little absurdist at the same time? So I start talking to her. She's at Goodyear and I'm like, square tires. What about it? Do you do that? Oblong, triangles? Have you tried any of these? And they're like, yeah, we've tried them all. Like, obviously physics says that the wheel works, and I was like, thank you very much. Don't think me an idiot, but like what I really wanted to do was underline the fact that form is there because round rolls, So these are the kinds of things. And I went through a bunch of different people. George Saunders, the excellent writer, and author, was fantastic. Oh my God. So many,
Was there any particular one, because there's a long list of folks that are in there. Is there anyone that in particular that stood out? Anything that I would say altered you in your understanding?
Yeah. Well, I just mentioned George Saunders. He blew me away because a lot of times I will just tell students, like, just because we're in a songwriting class and you start journaling does not mean you're going to end up being a songwriter. You may begin journaling and find out that this is not the place. You're in the wrong room. You may very well find that out. Accept it and run. Go to that room. And so George kind of said that because he wanted to be a singer-songwriter. He's, by the way, the preeminent sort of writer of in America at the moment, like, MacArthur Genius Grant, Booker Prize winner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He was like, I really wanted to be a singer-songwriter, but I really sucked at it. And I'm like, that's crazy. You're such an amazing storyteller. He's like, yeah, but the logic of song didn't work with the logic of what I want to translate out of my head. And he said, it's a moment of maturation to understand what it is you are most beautiful at. What can you do most beautifully? It might not be the thing you've been setting out to do. And the example he gave is, let's say you were writing string quartets, right? And everyone falls asleep and everyone hates it. And you get sad. And to console yourself, you pick up an accordion and start playing polkas, and everyone wakes up and starts dancing and having a great time. You kind of have to listen to that. And I said to him, to what degree do you think we have a choice in the matter? And he's like, none at all. And I was like, I think you're right. And I do see that in my students. Like, there are people who are just naturally brilliant at it. And there are other people who are naturally brilliant at something else, and I can see it, but they are writing songs. So they don't have
them. How do you help them to go to the light, Carol Ann?
Well, what I try to do is I try to get them to journal first, and to hopefully to get them to spot it themselves. I don't think just being like, you know what, you'd be a great manager because you're, it's not working for you with songs. I mean, like, that would be incredibly presumptuous of me to say, but if we're in office hours or whatever, I will lead. I think I will lead with questions, and do as much positive reinforcing in what I think might be a fruitful direction. I'm certainly not going to say that I know, but like, sometimes you can just see, when people are standing in their light or when they're standing mostly in their light. And I totally get it. I mean, I get the frustration of that. I get the tears in office hours from them. And like, just a great example has to do not so much with songwriting, but with style. There was this one woman who was so talented, started as a country singer, then went into this girl group thing, then was an R&B, and she was so frustrated. She would just cry and cry and cry. And she found Ableton and started getting into electronic. And now they have this like pop electronic band, and it's really going. They're going to South by Southwest in the coming weeks. And if we were together, you and I, to go out to see a show or something like that, I would take you to them. The band is called Moonkissed, by the way.
Moonkissed. Okay.
Yeah. But they're the band that I'd be like, you want to see a band? Let's go see a band,
That is such an art form in and of itself as well, to be able to, again, we go back to that commanding of presence, that there's something otherworldly about seeing a show where you just know. Yeah.
You can feel it. I would never want to be an A&R person or a talent scout, because like, it really is so instinct based, and it's so like, it could just be the night, like when you're with somebody, it's like, could have just been a one night stand. This could be wife material. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you'd really have to make some real jumps on some weird instinct levels.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to do that because I just like going to the show,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
But you can feel it.
I feel like we've all come up to and seen bands that, especially, I grew up in Seattle. Okay. So much music came out of Seattle, right? And I would go to shows and watch, and sometimes the band that you think is absolutely the band that should advance and become huge superstars never quite do it. And then the band that's like, oh, I mean, they're good, and they're the ones that become the big name. And you think, how did that happen?
I know. You're saying Pacific Northwest. I'm thinking just the Pacific Northwest. I just saw a documentary. What is it? Heaven Will Adore You, which is the Elliott Smith doc. And like, there's footage of him, and I would not have gotten it. I would have missed it totally. And on TikTok, sometimes a little like Schadenfreude kind of moment is like when an A&R person will be like, here's the band I passed on, right? There's this one guy, he was like, I saw this shaggy dude and weird voice, brought up this other guy who looked like he just walked out of the dryer. You know what I mean? Like, it was just awful. Turns out I walked out, and turns out the guy is Passenger, and the guy who walked out of the dryer was Ed Sheeran.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know if I could walk around with that, like, that's really hard. And it's just instinct failing you that one day.
Well, and all art is subjective as well.
Objective on different nights. They could have just had a bad night.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really a crazy thing. And that's really what I try to give students ballast for that, knowing that it's luck, timing. Like, here's a great one. Dua Lipa was just sued by this like nobody reggae act for Levitating, the song Levitating.
I heard that. I heard the two songs side by side.
That's a pretty good
argument there.
Pretty good argument. But what's interesting to me is like Levitating was huge, and it's the same-ish song, and that one didn't go anywhere, right? So it's really not about the songs very often,
Yeah.
Yes, there are songs that pop through and whatever, right, but there's so much else.
Well, and support and money also help. I mean, if you can afford to make your records, you can afford to go on tour, you can afford. It is an expensive nomadic life.
Yes, it's all of those things.
I mean, back in the day when we were younger, we all piled into a van and we went to all the, we would look to see where where people who had really made it, who sounded like us, where did they go to play? So then we would go to those places and we'd sleep in gross motels where everyone pig piled on the bed and just got as much sleep as humanly possible and then drove to the next thing.
Yeah.
It was hell on wheels, but it was fun and terrible and crazy and, everyone fighting and getting along. I mean, it's madness.
All of it. Yeah, it is all those things. And there's another sort of argument that sort of happens, which I think is founded, I should say, where it's like, a lot of people who do startups or who are in bands or whatever have independent wealth. They are coming from a place where they can afford to do that. And, that's a real thing. And I think that some people are trying to try to level that in some ways or even that out. But when you have startup cash, it helps.
It helps. And I mean, the internet obviously can be a great leveler, but it also can drown. I talked about this with Steve Lindsay, is that it could also, it'd be harder because there's just such a saturation.
Yes.
I suppose every generation has this is great, this is terrible.
No previous generation had the inventory that these people do. I mean, we can spend entire classes talking about bands that no one knows, you know, from student to student. Have you ever heard of blank? No. Have you heard blank? No. Well, this is like blank meets blank. Well, I don't know either of those. You know, like there's so much breadth. I don't know, which is good, which is bad, which is democratic, which is cool, but like the focus never, you know, it takes tremendous outlay of cash to cut through those kinds of things. And yet maybe it's in some ways it's better because like everyone can get in, right? Back in the day with the A&R people, there was no way of getting your toe in the door. Now everyone's feet are all in the door.
Would a Willie Nelson get signed today? Would a Johnny Cash get signed today? You know, you got to wonder.
Yeah. Well, they would get thrown off of any of the singing competitions and all of that, which is really significant, you know?
Yeah.
Because there is no definition. Like an award show presupposes a definition.
Bob Dylan would have been laughed. Simon Cowell would not have dug the Bob Dylan, right? No. He would have been like, what are you singing with marbles in your mouth? What's going on over there?
Absolutely. that would not have worked because Simon Cowell has a picture, right? At the end of the day, he's deciding what's good.
Right.
Which is ridiculous, which is criminal. Because, you know, hopefully there are other ways of flattening this, you know, and coming up with your own definition, you know. That's why people like the Elliott Smiths actually in the documentary, someone was like, Elliott Smith had an Academy Award nomination and it was a win for music because he's so out and he's looked completely out of the picture and from another planet entirely, which is a big win. So it's nice to see other definitions rise.
For somebody that isn't in the industry, why would this book be important to read?
I think this book can help because it's not really about songwriting. It's ostensibly about songwriting. It starts there, but it moves quickly through all kinds of different vocations and hopefully comes to similar conclusions that they're all sort of, there's a thread that interweaves all of them. You know, there's an approach to any of these endeavors that works. Things like journaling, sure, but things like be on time, right? That's not a songwriting thing. It is a songwriting thing, but it's a restaurant thing. It's a plumber thing. I don't know. It's like an everything thing. You know, what is quality? That is not a songwriting question, you know? And I think if you follow anything and get into anything deeply enough, it all kind of connects. It's not a unified theory, but it really does connect. You know, the elements of a great chair and a great sandwich and a great song, there's more that is alike than there is that is different. And a good song from 100 years ago and a good song from today, there's a lot more that's alike than there is different. That's what I kind of wanted to get to. And I do hope that people who aren't songwriters also check the book out. I have been talking to business podcasts or astronomy podcasts and Outside Magazine and like places like that, where these are more universal lessons and more universal conversations than just like how to write a chorus. Because you can find that out on YouTube in about 2 minutes.
Yeah. And honestly, all the stuff about patterning is really important in any field you could come across.
Yeah.
And even just in negotiation.
Yes. Well, there's that too. There's how to negotiate. There's a whole thing about co-writing, because co-writing is a really big deal in the songwriting world, but collaboration is a big deal anywhere,
Absolutely.
So the idea of like not getting everything that you believe that you were owed on one song because you're thinking long-term and the relationship that's not a songwriting issue. This just happens to be songwriting that I'm using to illustrate it.
Oh yeah, you gotta learn to stand up for yourself big time with publishers, with record labels, sometimes with artists. But community and there's a beautiful communion in songwriting when you're working with another person. It's such an intimate relationship.
Yeah, it's incredible. And when people find a crew like that, they stick to it. So like, I mean, I have students who are hoping to get cuts with Rihanna or something like that. I'm like, Rihanna's got her people. That ship has sailed.
Find the next Rihanna. Yeah.
Find the next Rihanna, but find the club. Get into the club. Be on time. One student told me, bring snacks. Right? So bring snacks, not nuts, but bring snacks.
Yeah.
To a collaboration, be intrapreneurial, which is to say like indispensable within the crew. And that crew closes up and they start writing. Shane McAnally said it.
Yeah, well, he's a great example. I was going to say you really picked somebody that is the epitome of that for sure.
Yeah. And they're just cranking it out. They know where everybody lives. They know their phone numbers. They know their ticks. They know the house rules, right? Mm-hmm. So being part of that, and respecting it and honoring it moving forward is the long game. And that's, again, long game is not a songwriting thing, but it is definitely a life thing. And it's about compromise, but it's also about, in the end, the long game is the one that wins.
Absolutely. That thing too is that I think for most creatives, we move our own goalposts all the time. We get to a goal and then we move the post and we're like, okay, this was success. And now over there, that's success. And you just keep pushing forward. Mm-hmm. And like in any good game, you just push your way through everything. And let's just say the offense is the word no. You have, and you have to hold the line and just keep going.
There was a show.
That's a really mixed metaphor. I'm so sorry.
No, but I'm going to mix it worse. There was a show by Jason Alexander. Jason Alexander starred.
Yeah, sure.
He was the guy from Seinfeld. And it failed, I think, but it was about like a motivational speaker or something. And I remember seeing the ad on the side of a city bus, and it was Jason Alexander pointing his finger, and the tagline was, "No is just yes to a different question," which of course means nothing, but is also it's very inspiring to me. It's just like, oh, you said no? How about this? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and like,
exactly.
maybe I can turn the no by changing the question.
Yeah. And only in terms of business. Let's keep consent is still consent, everyone.
Oh, well, yeah.
I guess that's what I'm saying. How did you end up on Billions?
Yes, consent. I consented to being on Billions. I went to school with, there are all sorts of relationships that ended up in Billions, which is strange. My sister has been on Billions. My sister Melissa. My friend from college, Paul Giamatti, is in Billions. The guy who wrote the show or co-wrote the show, Brian Koppelman, I went to high school with. And they needed, and we all played music and were in bands or whatever in high school. So when Brian and whoever it was came up with the storyline that there was going to be like this rock and roll fantasy camp kind of thing, Brian called up, whoever might go to one of those, So it was a couple of friends from high school, including my attorney who played bass.
My cousin?
Edward Grauer. And it was just really fun. It was just a really fun, weird, I don't know, it was a fun new thing for some of us. I think for Peter Zizzo, it actually may have jump-started an acting career.
Incredible.
Which is something he was hoping to get into. Peter, who was a well-known, successful songwriter, is now jumping into the acting world. And that was one of his first roles. It's hilarious.
You just never know. And that's another example of there is no time limit on creativity.
No, and they so many different things interweave. I mean, we sang the Eagles song "Lion Eyes," and we recorded it the day before in the studio where I recorded my last record. So I knew everybody at the studio, right? So they were all there. The music supervisor and I have worked before on other films, and it was just like, this is just very odd, and that happens sometimes. And I do talk about this in the book also. The concept of synchronicity is weird. It's like coincidence, but it's not. Or it is, but it's so coincidental that it's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
So that was a real synchronicity kind of moment. And the fact that it happened right around the release of the book, I was like, I mean, I just couldn't time any of this any better,
Yeah, no, it's great.
It was just crazy. It was crazy.
I love that. Tell people how they might find you.
I'm easily found.
There you are now.
Well, I am now. Mike Errico is the name. MikeErrico.com is the website. And pretty much everything is there. I mean, at Mike Errico for all the socials. And, and the book is available wherever books are sold, including, I have to say, wherever your local bookstore is. Consider going to your local bookstore to find it. They may not have it, but they might be able to order it. And there's Amazon. But, take a look at your local bookstore. Just go in.
Yeah, it's worth it.
That's what I do. I buy everything at my local bookstore.
Was it hard to pitch this book knowing that there were so many, songwriting books and songs in the key of life books,
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that's another, I did this thing in the book called Facing Down the Second Draft, right? Which is to say, like, facing down the first draft is like this crazy getting to know you kind of moment with a draft of an idea. But the second draft can actually be more damaging psychically because it's like, wow, I've revised it and it's still crazy and still weird, whatever. So in order to be closer to the reader, I was like, look, this is what I had to do. Okay. And I go through about 3 or 4 different drafts of what this thing was. I mean, I was like, I'm on the road. It's hilarious. We're going to get all these great road stories. And I made this memoir and it hit the back wall. Everyone hated it. And then I tried again with another look and they hated that. And then it was like, then I got into this teaching thing. This is over a course of years I'm talking about. And I wrote another book, which was like half road stories, half lessons from the road stories, right? And I got lucky and I had a break. I got a break. The break was a friend of a friend knew somebody in the industry who would read it before I pitched it. And the reader read it and said, this is half terrible, but it's half good. No is yes to another question. So I was like, please do tell which half is terrible and which half is great. And they were like, the half that has to do with you and your story on the road is terrible because I don't know what the hell, who you are. You went to a Cracker Barrel? Great. You and everybody else. So that was that. But she was like, you know what's really interesting? The lessons are really interesting. And you have a different voice when you're talking about that. And it's something that someone would read that they might actually learn from and get something out of instead of just like, oh, some dude had a crazy time. you know? So I went back to the drawing board. This is like draft 4 or 5 or whatever it was. And I just made it about the lessons, you know, and just took all the hijinks out. All the Motel 6s were expunged from the book. And it sold. It's shock. To my shock. Because
good on you though too, because you could have taken that and just been mortally wounded by the criticisms. But you pushed forward and you took the note.
Yeah. But you know what? It was weird. It was much weirder than getting a record deal. For me, getting a record deal was going to the bitter end or someplace like that. I was selling out, crying my eyes out at the end of the show in the backstage area because this A&R didn't show or this or that, whatever. And I was like, I'm going to do this because the world cannot not give this to me, right? For whatever crazy idea. For the book, it was like, I just love writing. I love it. And like, I can move and take notes because the act of writing is much more important than the, you know, arrogance or the weird drive or the anger or the crazy of the record thing. And I would love to do another draft, you know, person in the music industry or book industry. That'd be great. And now I'm thinking about like next book. I would love that, you know, because I just like it, you know, and it's much different than like, I got to get people down to the show. I got to have a hit. The chorus has to hit at wherever wherever it's supposed to hit.
30 seconds in.
30 seconds in or open with it altogether, you know, like, and like, that's muscular. And the book writing was much more finesse and it just came much more naturally, which is why the George Saunders thing was so interesting to me. Because sometimes you can really do something more beautifully and it's just easier. You know what I mean? Like writing a song sometimes can be really, really hard, but like getting up at 5 o'clock this morning and writing pages, not a problem. You know, you have to listen to that, you know? And so I've been listening to that and then I've been hoping to translate it and get it to my students. And I think it's been good. Hopefully. Oh, you know what? Ask them because I don't know.
Yeah.
He ruined my life. Fraud. You know.
I have some letters here that I'm going to read.
Oh, God.
Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Take care of yourself.
Okay, bye.
Be well. Cheers.
Bye. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.